Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Project Podcast presented by Project Insulin. Today, I am with John. John and I met at a local gym in Rhode Island and saw that he had, what was it? Did you have the CGM on? Maybe you had the.
Yes. Yep.
Yeah, had the CGM was on and easy to see, and we ended up talking. So, John, why don't you introduce yourself? Tell us a little bit about who you are, what you do, and then we'll get into your diabetes story.
Okay. My name's John Pecoraro. I am a high school teacher, middle school and high school teacher as of last year. I teach Spanish. Been teaching for about 12 years. I have type 1 diabetes, and I've been a type 1 diabetic since the age of 7. And I've had diabetes for a total of 37 years. In addition to working as a teacher, I also work as a personal trainer on the side, which is how we met.
And wow, that is a long time to have diabetes. So I'm sure your experience with it has changed over time. But
Mhm.
tell us a little bit about how did you find out? What was the story? Like how?
Yeah, the story is a combination between what my parents told me and what I experienced myself. My my mother told me that I had a flu-like illness in February 1987, and it knocked me down for a little bit. I was out of school for a short period. I got better, and then I got sick again with the same flu-like illness. And within 3 days of that, I started exhibiting symptoms of type 1 diabetes. My mother went to nursing school. My father was a paramedic, or was he paramedic? I think so. The classic signs are increased hunger, increased thirst. I was urinating all the time, and it didn't go on very long. It was like maybe a day or two that they saw these things happen, and they were like, "No, we got to bring him in to get checked out." So they brought me into a doctor in Providence. I remember there was snow on the ground, and walking in on the way in. Do you remember, how old are you, first of all?
I'm 29. I've only lived in Providence for 2 years, so I'm not like
Okay.
I'm not a local.
All right. So I want to talk more about the age aspect, because when car alarms first came about, they were extremely sensitive. So if you like brushed up against a car, it would set off the car alarm. So I remember setting off a car alarm as we were walking between two cars to go across the street, because my jacket zipper hit it or something. And I remember we went into the doctor's office, and I think it was simple enough. They did a blood test and they delivered the news to my parents. My mother, I think, started crying, and my father's go, okay. And it's something that's not unknown in my family. My uncle has type 1 diabetes. He got it when he was 4. So, yeah, that's my story.
That's the story. It's so interesting. The stories change so much from person to person, obviously, but anyone who has had like someone with a medical background as their parents or surrounding family members, it's snuffed out so much quicker. It's, oh, yeah, no, I know what this is. It's just really interesting to see that pattern. When you say your uncle has type 1, was it your mom's side or your dad's side?
My dad's side.
Oh, interesting. Because your mom, you're right, your mom picked it up and had the more severe reaction, but your dad didn't, maybe perhaps because
Oh, she had more of an emotional reaction to it.
emotional reaction. Yeah.
To get my father to emote back then was very difficult. Now it's
Okay.
now it's perfectly fine. It's 2024. We all have feelings.
And as a 7-year-old, I'm sure that what do you remember at all what it felt like to get diagnosed or like how your life changed that
Uh,
couple years or so?
I remember the hospitalization was not fun, and I was there with kids that were very sick, and they had like activities and stuff in the hospital. I was in there maybe total a week so that they could get me on an insulin regimen, and also put me through mock tests to show my parents what insulin reactions would look like. And I remember that vividly. Like, that was not pleasant. And anytime when I would complain about it, my mother would say, "You remember the kids that were in that room with you? A lot of those kids are a lot more sick and are probably never going home." So I wasn't allowed to feel bad for myself. And I lost my damn teddy bear at the hospital.
Oh
It
no.
was there one night and gone the next. It happened the day before I was supposed to be discharged. And yeah, poor Ted. He's
Or
hopefully he's in the hands of somebody that needed him.
maybe he's just become the hospital teddy bear over the
I
years.
maybe.
Yeah. It's so funny that that's a core memory, like the alarm, the car alarm, and then the teddy bear.
Yeah.
Uh,
Full
where
trauma.
yeah. Yeah, wow, and I'm curious, technology has advanced a lot between your diagnosis and today, but even, like, your diagnosis and 15 years later, 20 years later, like, how did I'm skipping ahead here, but, like, how did that change for you? Were you, like, a early mover into new tech, or were you more of a, "Let's see, like, how it goes with others?"
I watched your most recent podcast right before this, and I forgot her name already. She had an Irish last name. Very sweet.
Yeah, she's shoot, Carolyn.
Yes. And she was talking about the blood testers and having to
Yes.
match up the
Yeah,
colors. That was a thing.
yeah.
Uh,
Okay, that's your starting point.
that
You
was one of the starting points. It was
okay.
that, and you had to do regular urine tests, which, thinking about it, like that is so terribly inaccurate because you're trying to measure something that happened over the course of who knows how many hours or
Mhm,
days. And the blood tests themselves, it quickly moved from that color match system to something that you stuck in a machine that required constant calibration. And I I think it just read the pigment or
mhm.
the color changes. So that went on. I was on injections twice a day. Yes, twice a day. And there was regular insulin, NPH. And NPH was probably one of the worst products that I've ever had to take in my life. It really was. It's a long acting insulin, but it's a long acting insulin that has peaks to it. A lot of older diabetics will tell you that they would have to eat snacks throughout the day
Mhm, mhm.
and stuff like that. And that was to feed the insulin that you had on board. So you had to be on this regimented schedule. So in that, you also had to be on regimented schedule of when your injections were. And as I got older, this actually turned out to be pretty dangerous because I would start taking them later and not necessarily have all the carbs loaded that I needed to cover the insulin. But I was on insulin injections probably until the age of 27, I would say, and then started on my first pump, and I've been on a pump ever since.
Okay, yeah, and since you brought up the urine piece, what was that like? Tell me a little bit more about that part.
So yeah,
Like, how often were you doing this? Are you, like, in school, like, like
it was at home. It was once a day. I was before dinner, and you would have to, or not you, but I would have to urinate in a cup and take a eyedropper
mhm,
and take the sample and put it in a test tube with a tablet in it. And once it hit the tablet in the test tube, it would react. And oh, the same thing with the color thing again. I don't know why they tested the way that they did, but it would produce a color. So
uh-huh,
it would range anywhere from blue to orange. Orange was bad. So you wanted to be somewhere far under that.
okay, yeah, and that's so interesting. It's
I
like
have a side story to that too, which is
yeah, yeah,
kind of gross. So my uncle, being a type 1 diabetic,
right,
we would go over to my grandmother's house, and he lived there because he was a teenager. And at that time, this was probably the early, yeah, it was the early 80s. They would require you to collect urine samples over time, like
mhm,
over an extended period of time.
yeah.
How they tested that and got it to provide any useful information, I would never know. But I remember getting in trouble because I saw a cup sitting in the bathroom with pee in it, and I'm like, this shouldn't be in here, and I dumped it out, and it was like it was all of his week's worth
Oh,
gone,
no.
absolutely gone.
That's so funny.
That's fine. He's fine.
He's fine. Yeah, that's so interesting. It's so interesting to hear, like, how technology has changed and what was being done at different times. Carolyn specifically was talking about her diet was very rigorous. It was like you ate at exactly this time every day. There was like a book and everything, and I can't even talking to people who are mid 20s who got diagnosed 10 years ago, 15 years ago. It's like So nowhere remotely near the same kind of stories. And so, or at least that piece, right? Like the technology has advanced so much.
Yeah,
Uh,
they would force you to keep detailed records of your blood sugars,
mhm,
however many times that you took your blood sugar that day. And being somebody with ADHD, I did not do that. I would falsify it last minute just to get me through the awful meetings. And I remember that some doctors were absolutely wonderful and they could read the blood test and the A1C and they already knew what was going on
mhm.
and give recommendations from that. And some did it in a very kind way. There were others that just had a very poor bedside manner and decided to tell me that you're going to lose your feet and you're going to go blind and you're all this stuff telling a 7, 8, 9, 10-year-old kid. I absolutely hated going to. It was essentially the hospital. It was the only place that they had doctors there that were specialists in diabetes,
Mhm.
and they constantly had this rotating interns from local universities. Most of them were from Brown, I think. And that was super awkward because it was basically a physical every time that I went there, every 3 months.
Right.
And all these strangers are poking and prodding. It was quite the experience.
Yeah, geez. Yeah, that's gotta be very hard and very frustrating
Hmm.
to have a consistent face to the person. Like the relationship with your endocrinologist is so important. And we've learned that as a me and the viewers, if any of you consistently listen, have learned that over the stories of everyone so far. And
The shortage currently.
yeah, so I was about to bring that
Big
up.
time.
There's a national shortage.
Hmm.
There are not enough endocrinologists for all the patients they need to see, and they have it's not just diabetes, right? Like endocrinologists have a variety of an endocrinologist could do a variety of different things
Right.
with a different system. And so of them that are focused on diabetes, you can imagine if there's a national shortage just on endocrinologists at large, every one of the subfields also has a shortage as well. And I'm curious, like for you, because I know the answer for my partner, but how long, if you're supposed to go every 3 to 6 months to see your
Mhm.
end, what is the actual, you're in your meeting today and you're scheduling your next one. How far out are you scheduling that?
So my endocrinologist is really not all that bad. She's phenomenal. She's getting up there in years, and I'm worried that she's going to retire
Mm,
sometime soon. But she has a solid core of patients, and it's generally not difficult
uh-huh,
scheduling stuff, and hardly any of my appointments get canceled.
yeah.
There is quite a significant waiting time being there because she will spend an hour or longer with each patient, which is absolutely unheard of these days.
Mhm.
But I think it's absolutely wonderful because along with diabetes, you don't just have diabetes. Diabetes comes with all these other fun autoimmune stuff that nobody ever told you that could be possible or that you were even tested for. A good endocrinologist will look into everything, and she really has this huge global picture of what's going on and has considerations on just minor stuff. She says, "Oh, I noticed this. Are you having issues with whatever? Getting up in the middle of the night, or do you have muscle cramps? But it's all leading to all the different facets of things that could go on with somebody with type 1 diabetes. There's other autoimmune stuff that travels with diabetes. That I'm trying to think of all the stuff, but I can't. Like half of my TikTok is like diabetes TikTok. It's so weird, like how it it finds you, diabetes finds you, and
Yeah.
it's happened in every aspect of my life. It's actually happened at the gym because I have one former what do you call it? One former client who is type 2 diabetic. I have a current client who's a type 2 diabetic, and I have two current clients that are type 1 diabetic. And they just all flooded in within this 2 month window. I'm like, what is going on here? Like, that's not part of my bio.
Yeah,
Oh,
right.
I'll take the diabetes guy,
Yeah.
unless it's just like we can just see it. You're like, oh, yeah, he's got the beatus.
It's interesting you bring up the gym because obviously I saw your CGM, but I have seen this is a small gym for the viewers. I don't know, maybe 200 people total, maybe more. I don't know. I've probably seen 200 people at this place over the course of the past year and a half.
How
And
many make it on the podcast?
huh?
How many make it on the podcast?
None so far. I just feel one. I just don't wanna bother anyone who's in the gym, be like, "Hey, by the way, we're making insulin. Can I bother you about it in the middle of your set?"
I bother anybody that I see with a pump or a CGM.
Yeah?
I hold it up and I'm like, "Hey!"
Yeah, but that's different. You have
I'm
diabetes.
in the club.
You're in the club. I am on the outside kinda nudging my way in.
You're
Like,
club adjacent.
I'm club
We'll
adjacent.
take you as an honorary member.
I need a plaque or else it's not official. But yeah, so I've seen 4 or 5 people with CGMs on, and I'm like, it's just like a higher ratio than I would have expected at the gym. But it is interesting. It is definitely like the urge is like, oh, I need to go talk to these people. But anyway,
Do it because a lot of us feel alone. I don't have anybody close in my life that is a diabetic that can really understand the things that I go through. We don't.
no.
Which is why when I see one out in the wild, I'm like, "Hey, we've made it."
Yeah, so I this is a great segue because I want to get back to childhood. But what was it like, you know, going back to school after diagnosis, and what did you do? Did you explain yourself to your friends? Did you just do diabetes stuff in secret?
Yeah, they figured it out. I never hid it or anything like that. And during elementary school, they were pretty good. Like I was able to eat whatever I needed to, like right there in the class. They didn't start getting weird about it until junior high and high school, where I had to go to the nurse's office to have a snack. And that's 15 minutes that I'm missing out of a 45-minute class for somebody who's not doing terribly well at school. I got better. I got a master's degree, but still,
Yeah.
yeah, it was parts of it were isolating because of whatever policies or directives that they had, that they thought that me sitting in front of a medical professional eating was both good for me and for everybody else because it would be less distracting. But now, yeah, that was school.
Yeah.
School
Yeah,
wasn't
okay.
great.
School wasn't great, but
No, I made it. I
you
made it
made
through. When I was young, not young, fifth grade, I had a lot of control issues and diabetes control issues. I remember that I lost consciousness once. Yeah, it was once. And they had to dispatch the team and figure out what was going on. Luckily, my mother was coming to pick me up, so she ended up arriving within minutes of when I was coming to. They were pumping me through it full of orange juice and stuff like that, which is not easy with a small child that is not conscious.
okay.
But yeah, like childhood wasn't awful. I was able to figure most things out. I can't fault my parents for what they didn't know because there was no training for parents as to how to manage diabetes and how to manage the emotional side of it, both for them and for the patient, and also just really dangerous lows and stuff like that. Like the technology was not precise enough, and the insulin, the drugs available were not precise enough to really serve the needs effectively for type 1 diabetics, but I made it this far.
Yeah. Yeah. It sounds like it was hard, and it took out a lot for a lot of people. And I think that's true with a lot of chronic illnesses. But wow, I appreciate you telling us a little bit about how it was when you were younger, and something I'm as we move along the timeline of your life. It's just a reflective. Today's just a memoir for you.
This is
Uh,
your life.
I was wondering, about school. As school on the other side, right now you are a teacher.
Mhm.
And so I was curious about what do you do at the beginning of the school year? We're about to start a new school year. Do you tell your students that you have diabetes? Do you, turn off your CGM so that it doesn't alert you, disrupt in the middle of class? Are you more open about it? Do you like your students know? What is your process? Because obviously everyone has a different one.
I'm very open about it, and I use it as a segue, especially at the beginning of the year. I tell them if I am on the floor, I'm not sleeping. Call for help. Something's wrong. And then I go into I'm a type 1 diabetic, and all these things can happen. I get off topic really easily, but it also opens up for kids to have conversations with me, to for them to let me know if they've got anything going on,
Mhm.
because sure, it's listed in the databases and stuff, but to start that conversation early is always good. And they will always see me interact with my pump. And I've had a number of pumps, and I decided to name them depending on how annoying they were. And I just like
Yeah.
scream the pump's name out, "Shut up, Miranda," or whatever the case was. But yeah, now I eat in class. I will stuff sugar into my mouth whenever needed. The ups and downs of diabetes can make me pretty cranky. It makes any diabetic pretty cranky. And what's interesting is that I saw on TikTok recently that it takes up to 45 minutes for the brain to come back after a hypoglycemic episode. And if you're having hypoglycemic episodes every hour or every hour and a half, which for somebody who is very insulin sensitive, as somebody like myself, it's gotten a bit better. But
Yeah.
especially being on a school schedule, I'm eating constantly because I'm constantly moving, and I just burn right through the carbs and become more sensitive to insulin.
Yeah. Yeah, wow. That's I never thought of the aspect of you announcing to your class, also providing the class an opportunity to announce back to you. And
Privately, I'm not going to have them.
yeah, yeah, yeah. No.
Oh,
Hey, by the way, no.
yeah.
It creates that opportunity for them to come to you after class
Yeah,
and
because
tell you.
I had to initiate those conversations with my teachers
Mhm.
when I was in school, and that was awkward for I'm awkward to begin with. That's just another layer of awkwardness.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I know my sister has a rare chronic illness, and my partner has diabetes, and I've discussed with both of them about that feeling of having to walk up to your professor after class and like waiting for everyone to leave so you can talk to them one on one, and like being worried about how they'll respond, right? Because not everyone is like you, who's announces it ahead of time that you have an illness and is accepting. Some professors are like, "Oh, we don't do that in my class," and then you have to go to you go to the disability office, and then what? I'm specifically speaking in college terms. I'm curious, is there anything else you want to talk about? You've got the reins now. I'm frazzled.
You're frazzled. Okay, you basically talked about school, left out the 20s. I'm going to tell you that, and I tell kids this, that your 20s are probably the worst time in your life. This is not the golden years. Everything becomes a lot more difficult. Navigating type 1 diabetes by yourself, and also insurance companies, and making sure that you have access to insulin and that you have all of your testing supplies and that you're actually managing your condition. In my 20s, that was probably when I was at my worst. And I heard that in the podcast that I watched, that it's just like there is too much stuff going on, and our brains are not completely done cooking at that point. So there were a few scary things that happened up until the age of 23. And then I finally figured everything out, got a solid endocrinologist, and really got on a tighter track. And you mentioned stuff about working out in the gym and everything. A lot of that was inspired by being a diabetic,
Hmm.
and because being more sedentary just it wreaks havoc with condition. And you people will have far better control when they're active because it makes you more sensitive to insulin. It also decreases your risk from all these other things that could happen, and it slows down aging.
Thank you for getting us back on track.
Yes.
You nailed it. But I realized something that the younger audience members might not know that I'm sorry, the ACA, before the ACA, people were taken off their parents' insurance at 21, not 26. Today, a big issue or a big inflection point for people with diabetes is 26, you're off your parents' insurance, and you have to now figure out how to get insulin for yourself. You did not go through that. You went through that earlier at 21, or maybe even earlier than that. But yes, you saying that the 20s are really hard is yes, they're very hard. Generally, as a 20 something, well, just barely, rounding error at this point. But as a 20 something, it's like life starts happening.
Yes.
And like you have to figure out how to do life.
Yes.
Now, you had to figure out how to do diabetes and life.
Yes.
So I'm
Most
curious.
20-year-olds are pretty bad at doing mostly everything. And I
Yes,
can vouch for myself. Like, I was
yes.
awful. I was a bad human being. I was not humaning very well.
I don't think I figured it out yet. But what would you tell 20-year-old you, or like how did you figure it out? A, and then after that, what would you tell yourself when you were 20 to help alleviate some of the pitfalls that came along the way?
I think a lot of it had to do with creating a lot of structure and self accountability. But as far as external factors, like affordability of insulin, access to insulin, health insurance, and all of that stuff, like diabetes, I'm not going to say it held me back, but it kept me from experiencing a lot of stuff that other people got to experience. Like I never could even fathom being able to travel in my 20s. And when I was going to college, I would I also had to work full time because I had to maintain health insurance. And working full time and going to school uh, are things that do not go well together. So, good news is that I finally was able to travel to Spain this past April, age of 44. But I remember people back that in job interviews, they say, "Oh, where have you traveled to?" and this, that, and the other. And I would be very honest with them. I said, "I'm a type 1 diabetic. Being able to one have the funds available to travel is difficult enough, and two, I'd have to work full time constantly in order to make sure that I had just access to these things." I see that the future may be brighter for people. We're not there yet. There are measures to cap insulin prices, which is partially effective because I remember calling that out when on my last insurance, I would still get charged the $300 or $400 per vial that the insulin costs. And I questioned it, and the lady had to explain to me how the law worked. And it only applied to fully insured plans. And most group insurance plans were not required to participate in that. And the group insurance plans, which most people have through their employers, it's 2/3 of the market. That's 2/3 of the market, or 2/3 of the diabetics that are employed that do not have that benefit of the $35 insulin cap. That has changed. Most recently, it is far cheaper than it ever was. So I think that's one tiny step in the right direction. But uh, without access to affordable, quality healthcare is a death sentence to any diabetic. And I'm sorry to take the podcast in a negative direction, but I feel like society really needs to get this right in the future because we cannot afford to have anybody be untreated for things that they had no choice in what they got. And throughout the years, I get a lot of people just shrugging their shoulders. I don't know what you wanted me to do. And I'm looking down the list of options that I have, which is, do I ration insulin? Do I go into mountains of credit card debt? Do I just get admitted to the hospital for stupid reasons because companies decide how much insulin you get, how often, and place barriers to getting the care that you need. So I think that we as a society really need to get that right because we can't afford not to. The number of diabetics worldwide and in this country alone has ballooned, and especially so since after the COVID-19 pandemic, which is still going on. There are a lot of younger people that are getting diabetes, and it's type 1 diabetes. They're getting it in their 20s and 30s where they just, no more insulin for you because it is an autoimmune disorder.
Yeah, no, don't apologize for it's not a negative, it's just the truth. This is like what is happening today. And I generally do my best to not bring up, our work, right? Like trying to make insulin affordable and why in the podcast, because this is more about educating and, letting people share their experiences. But what you just said is exactly why we exist, and why seeing what's going on and learning about it for the first time in 2020, that this is crazy. There's no reason why insulin should be expensive. We can talk about healthcare at large as an issue, but insulin specifically, it's been around for 100 years. The current ones on the market are all, well, not all, but most of them are now not on patents. The patents have expired. There's no reason they should still be so expensive. And yeah, we're trying to change that. And we see we see how hard it is. We wish we could be faster. We wish that I could just tomorrow give you insulin. And I mentioned in one of the previous episodes that like it is heartbreaking to get emails where people are asking us like, do you have any vials?
Yeah.
Like I'm out.
Yeah.
I'm out of insulin. Do you have any for us? And
Yeah.
we can't we no, we don't. And I can't, as the face of the company, I can't go and be like, "Hey, actually, I know some people who do," because that's not legally. I'm not allowed. You're not allowed to share your insulin with someone else legally. And for us, the long-term goal is to get it for everyone. And getting caught today doing something like that would be really bad. And so it's frustrating because that is how I could help someone today, but that is not how we can help most people tomorrow.
It's
Uh,
yeah, it's infuriating that in the year 2024 that there are still people that are rationing insulin and choosing to go without. And I have heard and seen and witnessed horrifying stories because in our society it really does fall on the individual, and there's a lot of shame involved in that. And I think that people who have not just diabetes, but anything that they need a constant supply of medication for, feel like it is a burden to other people and they don't want to be a burden to others. I'm here to say you're not a burden, you diabetics and non-diabetics. You are all worthy of love and insulin. And I thank you for spearheading the initiative to make biosimilar insulins affordable.
Yeah, thanks. And yes, you are all worthy of affordable healthcare and are not a burden. Something again, I have a little sister with a chronic illness, and for a while I didn't know how to interact with her because I had never heard of her illness. Not many people have, but B, didn't know what to do. Right, like to be, it is hard to be there for someone when you don't know what they're like, how to be there for them. Obviously, it's my sister. I learned, we see each other. So just over time, I learned, but there's a step of vulnerability to be the person and be like, hey, John, how can I help? And it's not on you to tell me, right? It's, you can, more specifically, what I should be saying is, hey, John, like in this in scenario XYZ, what is actually happening to you? And how can I be there for you in that scenario? Is a much better way of doing it, right? I went off and learned about diabetes or whatever the illness is, and then came to you because there's a specific thing that's happening to you that isn't maybe necessarily something I can find online. Yeah, and so I'm curious, what do you think about that version of helping someone with an illness, and would you amend it? You tell me I'm full of shit. Tell me that, is there a way that you would want that to happen for you?
I guess it goes along with anything when it has to do with somebody else's needs. Sure, you
Mhm.
can ask them, or you can just start doing.
Yeah,
Think, oh, hey, I brought you this. Oh, hey, I noticed that you're all out of syringes or whatever the case
yeah.
is. I don't think that syringes require a prescription anymore.
I I
Mm,
th- I think I believe there's something. I don't know if you can just go and buy a packet or
I
whatever.
think you can.
It's becoming like a plastic thing,
No, I
but
think you can.
really? You just
Yeah,
go and
I think I. It's been a while since I've had to buy them, but
okay.
anyway, like just terribly, a lot of it comes down to money.
Yeah,
And I'm not saying that you should be doling out tons of money for your fellow diabetics. Whether you have diabetes or not, we are all in this together. And the, everybody, absolutely everyone, is only one step away from disability. And it's a very scary fact. It could be everything could be fine today, and tomorrow there could be some sort of illness that you have, or accident, or whatever the case is. And life should not be that much more difficult for somebody with a condition with artificial barriers around it so they can't get the help that they need.
no. I like that you put it, artificial barriers, right? If all else was equal, we know how to take care of this. We don't know how to cure it. We know how to help you have a good and healthy and high quality life. But there are these barriers, and it's not science, it's across the world. It's just artificially made harder. No. Yeah. Not the conversation I thought we'd have, but
Really?
I love this podcast. It's just like it's been such a pleasure to learn and like just let it happen.
Mm.
Because yeah, yes, I know who you are, and I know we talked for a few minutes beforehand, but yeah, I didn't know this is what we'd be talking about.
Me either. And some of this stuff I haven't told anybody
Mm.
in 44 years.
Are you okay with this going? We
Oh,
got
sure.
8 listeners, but are you okay?
Have at it.
I was gonna ask you, do you see us on Diabetes TikTok?
No.
Ah,
Why are you being shadow banned
I
by Eli Lilly?
no, I don't think so. People see it. Not a ton. We get like 300 views
I
on
had to look you up on YouTube.
yeah, just to find us.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm not sure what the if anyone in the comments, well, yeah. If anyone knows
Please like, comment, and subscribe. You're supposed to say that every time, like point to the little
every
button.
2 minutes. Yeah, yeah. I say it at the end, and I do a very bad job. It's like very awkward. I like not sure of myself. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's a learning process. But yeah, I think we've taken down the seriousness a little bit at the end here. But yeah, so what would you tell 20-year-old you going back to that?
I forgot. What am I going to tell myself?
Just what would you tell yourself when you were 20 at the beginning of this 10-year period where things just are harder? What would the advice be?
Stick it out because you're going to figure it out and it will get better. And there will be people along the way that will help you.
No.
And then other people will find you.
Yeah. And I'm curious, do you feel like you're missing something by not having a community of people with diabetes around you? Because you brushed on it earlier, but you didn't go into it. So I wanted to ask about this.
I'm a loner anyway. I think there's vast areas of life where we lack community.
Hmm.
But having a medical condition is very isolating. It doesn't have to be, but it is. And sure, there's these people that say, oh, here's diabetes camp and stuff like that. And I never want to do that because I didn't want to go to a special place for other kids with diabetes. They made sure they didn't run too fast or whatever the case is. I wanted to do all of the regular stuff that everybody else did. And I think that, yeah, sure, it's great to have a community for diabetics, but also to realize that we fit within the greater community. We belong there as much as anyone else.
Yeah. John, thank you for coming on on an episode with us here at Project Podcast presented by Project Insulin. I really appreciate you coming on. And if you enjoyed the episode, please share and subscribe to our YouTube, Spotify, Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, LinkedIn, and Twitter. That's the longest one I've ever done. It was special for you.
Great
Uh,
job.
yeah, so thank you, everyone, and see you next time.